It's strange how a small moment can change the way you see everything. You could be sitting in a coffee shop, watching people go about their day, and suddenly it hits you. This quiet sense that maybe things aren't falling apart after all. Maybe, just maybe, they're slowly coming together. Not in the way you pictured, not on your timeline, but still. Coming together. You might not even realize it at first. That something inside you is softening. That the fear is loosening its grip. That you're starting to breathe again, not because the world has become less chaotic, but because you've become a little more anchored. That's what optimism feels like to me. Not blind hope, not pretending everything's fine, but noticing the small signs that life is still moving forward, that people still try, that you still try, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You ever notice that the people who have been through the most often have the most hope? Not the loud kind, not the motivational, slogan kind, but the quiet, resilient kind. The kind that lives in the way they show up day after day, even when it's inconvenient. Even when no one's watching. That's what keeps me optimistic about the future. Not some grand vision, not some certainty about how things will turn out, but the evidence of people trying, again and again, to be just a little better. A little kinder, a little more aware. I met a man once, this was years ago, who'd lost almost everything. His business had collapsed. His marriage ended. He was living in a small studio apartment he could barely afford. And yet, when you spoke to him, he wasn't bitter, he wasn't angry. He said something to me I'll never forget. He said, the worst thing that happened to me was also the best thing, because it woke me up. He wasn't trying to sound wise. He wasn't writing a book. He was just telling the truth as he'd come to understand it. That sometimes it's the breaking that reveals what's real, what matters, what lasts. I think we forget that sometimes. We get caught up in the noise, the headlines, the chaos. We think the world is on fire, and in some ways it is. But then we overlook the quiet acts of courage happening in the margins. The single mom learning to code at night after her kids fall asleep. The teenager who decides not to give in to peer pressure and chooses kindness instead. The man who apologizes first. The woman who walks away from a job that pays well but poisons her soul. These stories don't make the news. But they are real and they matter. You know what I've noticed, most people aren't looking for guarantees. They're just looking for signs that trying is still worth it. That even if the system is broken, even if things feel heavy, there's still something we can do that makes a difference. There's still something we can hold on to. Optimism, for me, doesn't mean expecting everything to go right. It means trusting that even when it goes wrong, we'll figure something out, that we're wired for adaptation. That struggle is not the opposite of progress, it's part of it. Think about your own life. Think about the moments you grew the most. Were they easy? Were they linear? Or were they messy, confusing, painful? And somehow transformative. You've probably surprised yourself more than once. You've probably looked back and thought, how did I get through that? And maybe even more importantly, who did I become because of it? That's why I believe in people. Because I've seen it over and over again. People lose everything and rebuild. People make huge mistakes and still change. People hurt others and then heal others because they learned what pain feels like firsthand. There's something incredibly beautiful about that. The way we carry both our wounds and our wisdom in the same body. The way we're never just one thing. We're constantly becoming, constantly evolving. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. You're not even the same person you were last month. That in itself is hopeful, because it means we're not stuck, even when it feels like we are, even when the future seems blurry. I've had days where I wanted to quit, where the weight of the unknown felt unbearable, where nothing I did seemed to matter, and then something shifted, a phone call, a walk, a single sentence in a book that reminded me who I was, what I cared about, why I started. Sometimes we wait for clarity before we act, but what if clarity comes from action? What if the future becomes more hopeful the moment we start showing up as if it is? A friend of mine told me once, I keep planting seeds even if I don't know when, or if they'll grow. And I loved that because planting seeds is an act of faith. You don't see the roots right away, but they're there, quietly building strength beneath the surface. That's how change happens, quietly, gradually, and then suddenly. You might feel like your efforts don't matter, but someone is watching you. Someone is inspired by the way you keep going. They might never say it out loud, but your consistency, your kindness, your integrity, it ripples. There's this idea we often forget, that the future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we help shape. With every word, every choice, every time we decide to take the high road, to listen instead of react, to forgive instead of resent, I think about the next generation a lot, what they'll inherit, what they'll question, what they'll repair, and honestly, that gives me even more hope, because they're not interested in doing things the way they've always been done. They're not afraid to ask hard questions, they care deeply. And they're watching us. What we normalize, they inherit. What we avoid, they carry. What we model, they amplify. So maybe the question isn't, what kind of future will we have? Maybe the question is, what kind of ancestors do we want to be? You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep showing up, with humility, with courage, with a willingness to learn and unlearn. There's something incredibly optimistic about the idea that we get to try again, that every day is a blank page, that the future isn't written yet, and we hold the pen. Do you ever think about how much had to go right for you to even be here? How many generations survived impossible odds? How many people didn't give up? So you could sit here, listening to this, breathing, thinking, becoming. That's not a small thing, and yet here you are, carrying forward everything they passed down and adding something new to it. That's the work, not to be perfect, but to be present, not to control the future, but to influence it through the choices you make today. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're disillusioned, maybe you've been burned too many times to trust easily. I get that. You're not alone, but I still believe in you. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you haven't quit. Because there's still a part of you that wants to believe in something better. And that desire, that longing, it's not naive, it's powerful. Cynicism is easy. You don't have to risk anything to be cynical. But hope takes courage. Hope asks you to look pain in the eye and still say, I'm not done yet. You don't have to move mountains. Sometimes it's enough to move the needle, to shift the energy, to do one small thing a little differently today than you did yesterday. Smile at a stranger, speak up in a meeting, apologize first, call your dad. Drink more water, read a page, go for a walk. Tell someone you're proud of them. Tell yourself you're proud of you. That's how the future gets better, not all at once, not in giant leaps, but in quiet, deliberate choices made by people who care. People like you. You know what I've learned. People don't change because you pressure them. They change because something touches them, something lands, something makes them feel seen. So instead of trying to fix the world, maybe just try to see it. To really see people, their complexity, their contradictions, their efforts, their wounds. That's what makes room for growth. That's what softens hearts. That's what opens doors. You've probably been through enough to know that life doesn't always give you what you want, but it often gives you what you need if you're paying attention. The delays, the rejections, the detours, the relationships that didn't work out. At the time they hurt, but later they taught you. They shaped you. They cleared the path for something more aligned. And what if you're in that season now, the one that feels like it's tearing things down instead of building them up? What if this is the part where your roots are growing deeper, not weaker? What if what feels like an ending is really a recalibration? Because you don't just stumble into meaning. You build it, layer by layer, day by day, through attention, through presence, through the decision to keep leaning in when it would be easier to pull away. You don't have to pretend everything's okay. You just have to keep going. Keep choosing love over fear, curiosity over judgment, integrity over ease. You don't have to know how it all ends. You just have to take the next right step. And then the next one, and then the next one. Because one day, someone will look back at this moment, this messy, uncertain, overwhelming moment, and say, that's when everything started to change. And maybe, just maybe, they'll say it because of something you did. Or something you chose not to do, or something you chose to believe, even when it would have been easier not to. That's what keeps me optimistic. That's what keeps me here, still trying, still believing. Still becoming.